Oh, yep. Oh. Sorry.
And now you can kind of set it down. So you can start to rotate, and then I'll just, we're going to go this way.
Oh, this way?
Yep.
This way?
Yep. Okay. And then I can catch, you can get under here. I've got the weight of it. Okay. Good. Yep.
We're going to the ground?
Yep. Okay. And then just roll it here. And then we can move it a little closer to the cradle. That'll give us some room to get it flipped upside down and down. Okay. Once we get it upside down, it'll be really easy to grip.
Yeah.
Here, someone can start rolling it towards me.
So they want to get in like the middle there.
There we go.
Oh, you're right.
Yep.
Just let me know.
And we'll let Josh control how quickly we go.
Be sure.
Yeah. I might bend a little bit.
You don't break it.
Don't break it. Cool.
And
I weigh twice as much as you do.
Hold on, the carpet fell off this side.
Okay, that's all right. I can put the carpet
ahead.
back under it once
Okay.
it's set down. Okay. Air conditioner back on. Hey, bud. You want to help? You want to work in the shop? Welcome back to Make Stuff Nation. With the boat flipped over, now I can move on to finishing the outside of the hull. My first step is going to be cutting these spacers from the dagger board case flush with the keel. Then I'll move on to sanding the entire outside of the hull. That'll get it nice and smooth before I add my final coat of finish. Let me bring you up to date on where we're at with the boat project. I sanded the boat down and applied 2 layers of penetrating epoxy, sanding between each coat. Once the epoxy was done, we moved on to varnish. Varnish is going to protect the epoxy from UV light and to prevent it from degrading. I applied 3 coats of varnish first, let those cure for 48 hours, then sanded the whole boat lightly and applied 3 more coats of varnish. That gives us a total of 6 coats and should provide enough protection for this boat. It's not going to be outdoors all the time. It'll just be on the water when we're actually sailing it, and then it'll be trailered and covered. Obviously, every year or two, we'll need to put on a couple more coats of varnish, but that's pretty standard for any type of boat. Now that I've got the exterior finish done, we're going to flip it upright and work on attaching the rub rails and finishing the decks. On the wooden Snipe, the rub rails or splash guards that go along the sides of the boat are made out of 2 different strips of wood. The plans call for white oak, but I don't have any white oak available, and the lumberyard or sawmill that I usually use doesn't have any at the moment. So I'm going to use some cherry that I have in stock to substitute. It's a good dense wood and is more than strong enough. And again, this boat's not going to be sitting in the water all the time, so I'm not really worried about rot resistance. I'm going to take my rough sawmill boards, plane them down to rough thickness. Then I'll rip out these strips with the angles, which I've calculated up here, and then I'll use the planer to do any final dimensioning. Here are the rough cut rub rails or splash guards. The ones here on the left are the ones that will be attached directly to the boat. The ones on the right will be attached on top of those. Now the way I cut these out of the rough stock, they're actually taller than they need to be, or wider, depending on how you look at it. So I'm going to run these through the planer in this orientation to trim them down until this top face is the appropriate width. I'll be doing the same thing on these. These won't take as many passes, but again, I'll be planing off this surface to bring the width down till it matches the plans. These are the rub rails or splash guards milled to their final dimensions. You can see they'll fit up like that. So that's how they'll fit up when they're mounted on the side of the boat. I've gone ahead and marked and pre-drilled and then countersunk the holes on the inner rub rail. These will be plugged and then covered up by the outer rub rail once they're installed. So my next step is going to be to steam them to make sure that they don't crack when I put them in place. To steam the rub rails, I've got a little steam generator kit hooked up to 20 feet of PVC pipe that was scrapped from another project. That's warming up right now and will hold the 16-foot rub rails. What we've got going on. As you just saw, I've steamed and attached the inner rub rail to the boat. Now I've gone ahead and only attached it every other screw because that's just to hold it in place while it sets and cools down. Then off camera, I steamed and attached the outer rub rail to the boat. Again, this is just fastened at the forward and aft end of the boat to hold it in place while it cools down and sets into its shape. With them steamed in place and cooled down, now I'm going to remove them from the boat and bed them in with bedding compound. That'll give a nice watertight seam between the rub rails and the boat. Once they're completely attached, I'll fair in the rub rails with the deck, sand them smooth, trim off the ends, and then we'll coat them with varnish to give a nice waterproof finish. To get the inner rub rail on the starboard side ready for the outer rub rail, I need to go ahead and finish trimming all these plugs off flush. So trimming these plugs flush is pretty easy with a chisel and a mallet. I'm going to go bevel down and ride the bevel along the rub rail to prevent the chisel from digging in too deep, and just trim the plug flush. Then I can come back from the other side and fine tune it. Finally, I can go bevel up and pare off the final bit of material. With that nice and flush, I'll move on to the next one. With all the plugs trimmed flush on the inner rub rail, now I'm going to go ahead and install the outer rub rail with some dolphinite bedding compound and bronze screws. Well, that wraps up the installation of the splash guards or rub rails. Next time, we're going to go ahead and sand the rails and blend them in with the decks, as well as finish all the deck work in the rails and touch up the paint along the cockpit. There isn't much work left to be done on the hull of the boat. Besides finishing the decks, we'll need to build a tiller for the rudder, install the mast step, and install the splash guards that go on top of the deck. From there, it's going to be assembling the sail kit that I bought, as well as eventually building a mast for the boat, and then we'll be able to get it out on the water. I hope you found this video entertaining and useful. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments. Thanks again for watching Make Stuff Nation. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.